I'm going to try to help you educate you all on how to leverage your knowledge to be able to support your students and hopefully be able to have their skills and their giftedness translate into at least some type of scholarship at the NCAA or NAIA or NJAA. All of those acronyms will make sense in a little bit, but we'll go through some of the processes to help you help your students if they're looking to do sport. Also, the third bullet point, we're hoping to give you a bit more of a realistic outlook on what it means to play sports in the United States. So that you have some tools if you have a student who is dedicated and knows they want to play a sport, but you really know that they might not be able to play at the level they expect they're going to play at. We'll give you some statistics. We'll help you figure out how to maybe softly give that news to your students. And then finally, Catherine's going to help us provide some language to guide your students through this really, really complex process. Maybe a problem, hopefully not. So I did want to say really quick, there are some limitations to what we are doing right here. This panel does not consist of anyone from the UK. It doesn't consist of anybody from Canada. It doesn't consist of anybody from the NCAA's Division II or Division III. That'll make sense in a second, what those divisions mean. And we don't have anybody from the other two, NAIA or NJAA, which you'll understand in a second. We don't have any compliance officers. So I don't think we have any. I see some other Division I folks, but if there are any folks who represent any of those, please contribute, yell at us, correct us. If you know of anything, let us know. It'll be kind of a team effort. So, in the spirit of knowing who we have in the room, I hope everybody has their phone or a laptop with them. Pull out your phone or a laptop and go to menti.com. When you go to menti.com, you'll be asked for an access code. I'll give that to you in a second. Oh, hopefully you have cell service. Fingers crossed. So when you go to menti.com, there should be a code. Type in the code 799781. 799, it's right on the top of the screen too, if you can see it. 799781. Menti.com.
Does anyone need a hotspot?
menti.com. Perfect. Yep, that's it. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Never. So then put in 79. There we go. People are already doing this. And it should be self-explanatory. Let us know who you are in the room. Perfect. So we have mostly high school counselors. We have some others in here. This is perfect. So we're about half high school counselors. It looks like we have some university reps in the building. So we have 11 of you have already put stuff in. Next, as we're going through this, for high school counselors, the question we want to ask you is, have you ever counseled a student who wanted to play sport for scholarship? All you high school counselors in the room.
This is really cool. I love this. I can't wait to use this at school.
Should have hit a station on me.
Yeah, I need a kickback if I do that. So this is perfect. So most of you actually have had some students who wanted to play sport for scholarship. The next thing that we wanted to see is, for high school counselors, those of you who have students, what are the sports? Just type in the word cloud, type in what sports your students are most interested in. I think you should be able to input more than one. Golf. Does that mean American football or soccer? Yep, soccer, track, tennis.
I always say that.
Yeah. So soccer is by far the highest. Squash. These are all great. Cricket, yeah. This is perfect. So, I know we had a few university reps in the room. Fingers crossed, but university reps, if you want to key in and tell us what division you're in. I think there might have been a few of us. We're all in Division, well, Julie and I are in Division I. Looks like we're Division I heavy.
Division 3, yeah.
Okay, thank you for, now we have a little feel for who's in the room right now. Really quick, what we want to tell you is, you heard about all those little acronyms. Really quickly, we wanted to go through what some of the languages that you'll hear about athletics. So there's the main governing bodies in the United States. There's 3 of them. NCAA, They hate it when we say NCAA, so I'm trying to break my habit and say NCAA. NCAA is by far the most prolific. It's the most number of schools, it's the most scholarship dollars. That has 3 different divisions, Division 1, Division 2, and Division 3. NAIA only has about 350 members. There's smaller schools, fewer sports. The entry requirements academically is a little bit more lenient. And then NJCAA is a junior college. That's students who are starting an associate's degree and then jumping into four-year college. If you watch Netflix, there's a show about football players who are doing that. Last Chance U. That's the tournament, or that's the division that they're in. So we're not going to go through all of this, but we wanted to make sure it was in the slides. So when we give this to you, you'll have a lot of this information. But this is NCAA Division 1, where there's average enrollment, number of sports. There's also kind of the largest enrollment, highest profile. This is the one that probably your students think when they think of sports at college. They think of NCAA Division 1. There's Division 2, which actually more students receive aid. It's only about 3%, but more students actually receive aid in Division 1 for athletic scholarships in Division 2 than Division 1. So there's actually more scholarships. By a little bit, but there's more scholarships. Division 3, there are no scholarships available at Division 3. That's probably the biggest difference. There's no athletic-based scholarships at Division 3. But if you notice, 75%, 20% more than Division 2 actually receives some type of aid. So keep that in mind. Don't let your students forget about Division 3 if they're looking for a really, really good academic and sport balance. And don't assume that scholarships won't be available. They are very, very generous at Division 3 with scholarships. So, next, really quick, get your phones back out. We're going to test your knowledge about NCAA athletics. Get your phones out. It's the same code. It's the same code. You can choose 2. There's 2 sports on this list that are NCAA scholarship eligible. Which 2 sports are they? People think skiing and fencing. We have a triathlete. No one thinks karate is a NCAA scholarship sport. Fencing, rugby, or even across the board. Rugby is...
Rugby for all.
Shall we see? The correct answer is skiing and fencing. Those are the only two sports on that list that you can actually have a scholarship in. And if you look, what we're going to give you 2, these are all the NCAA sports. NCAA. Don't tell anybody at the NCAA. I keep on saying NCAA. So this is by season. And if you look on the far right, I actually kind of cheated and I pulled 2 from the emerging sports. There's a lot of club sports, and the NCAA is thinking about bringing those on as scholarship sports, but they're not there yet. So keep those in mind. Okay, really quick, let's talk numbers. In the United States, pull out your phone, in the United States, at the NCAA Division 1 and 2 level, there's 300,000 athletes. How many do you think are Indian? People are fairly certain there's hardly any. There's 96 currently that are student athletes from India in the NCAA Division 1 and Division 2. So now this is a kind of a little bit of a reality check. In men's tennis, what percent of high school men's tennis players do you think go on to play at the collegiate level? 0 to 4, 5 to 9, 20 plus. Oh, this is split across the board. Wait for one more and see if we can break that tie. Oh, someone just ruined our chances. So it's actually set 5%, and these are all the numbers. The NCAA does this report. NCAA does this every year. They do all the percentage of high school students that actually play in the NCAA at any level. And you notice there's only a few sports, ice hockey and lacrosse, that even break into the double digits of the percentage of high school athletes that end up playing sport. What do you think about women's soccer from high school to college? Still, everybody thinks it's pretty low. You learned from the last graph? Correct, it's about 7%. Now, if that wasn't depressing enough, what percent of collegiate athletes at the men's basketball level do you think play in professional sports, go on to the NBA? What percent of collegiate athletes end up playing professional sports?
Wow,
Yes. 1.2% of all NCAA athletes will go on to play in the NBA, and these are other professional sports. 9% baseball is the closest one. I think it is interesting, if you look on the far right for men's basketball, 20% of all pro players come from the NBA, or from the NCAA. Perfect. That was a little bit to give you a sense of what the numbers are. Thank you for engaging with us.
Okay, now that Seth has kind of explained the realities of how competitive it is to get scholarships, I know that's what students are looking for. You have to think about, do they need the scholarship or they want the scholarship? So you see here, the NCAA does award $3.3 billion in scholarships annually across 175,000 student athletes. And in fact, the graduation rates among student athletes are higher than among the general student population. 8 out of 10 do get their degree. All right, so for scholarships, there are going to be two types, the full scholarship and partial scholarship. In NCAA language, full scholarship is awarded based on head count. Head count means that it's, how do I explain this? Okay, so let's say football is a head count sport, and the other sports would be women's tennis, women's golf, men's and women's basketball. And why is there disproportionately more women sports in the head count? Because it needs to equal, for equity purposes, up to the 85 that are awarded for football. And this is American football. So these are whole full scholarships that include tuition, room and board, and books. But really, a majority of the scholarships are going to be partial scholarships. And those are equivalency sports. And those are all the sports I didn't mention earlier. And the equivalency is based on percentages. So let's say for golf, for instance, women's golf has 6 scholarships. Men's golf has 4.5 scholarships. This is mandated by the NCAA. But for women's golf, they can have 6 athletes with 6 full scholarships. Or they can have it for 12 athletes, and each of them get 50% scholarships. I know it's kind of a lot to understand, but there's a big disparity between full and partial scholarships. And partial scholarships can be as modest as 10%, and it could be as modest as just getting books. So when you hear students are on a scholarship and they're kind of vague about it, you cannot assume it's a full scholarship. It can be a very modest amount. And then you have to think about public institutions versus private institutions. If a head coach is considering a scholarship for an in-state student versus an out-of-state student, but they're of equal talent, they're going to probably prefer an in-state student in that case for a public institution. Also, these scholarships are awarded and not guaranteed for 4 years. They are 1-year scholarships in which a student has to re-sign. The scholarship can be taken away, or they can be academically ineligible. They're not maintaining a 2.0 GPA, or they've become seriously injured and cannot continue to participate in that sport. And sometimes there may be a head coaching change, and the relationship between the student athlete and that coach can change, or they may get less playing time, so they can opt out of their scholarship. Okay, so how to get on the pathway to pursue the scholarship opportunity. 1 is being scouted, 2 is working with agents or recruiting services, and 3 is contacting the university, the head coach. So being scouted. Being scouted means that the coach is identifying your athletic ability. And they do that usually typically by going to national and international competitions. Again, that varies depending on the competitiveness of the schools. So I'm kind of talking more from a reference of being at a large Division I athletic department. So how do students from India do that? So they would have to probably go to camps and get exposures there, and just be at the highest level. I mean, if you're looking at Indiana, UCLA, Iowa, USC, I mean, they're going to be competing at the highest level of their sport. So not just state level, but really the national and international levels, national or junior Olympics or whatnot. So Next is working with sports agents or recruiting services. And there's a wide range of these services. Yes, there's going to be very reputable and good, honorable recruiting services, and there's going to be dodgy and questionable agencies. And there's not ones that we're going to be able to recommend, and that's kind of really a lot of research to identify the services you want to work with. I'm not saying to recommend it, but it doesn't guarantee anything. If an agency is using aggressive sales tactics, guaranteeing, I would kind of shy away from that. So it would require a lot of research, but I think working with recruiting services does expand and maybe uncover opportunities for scholarship that maybe is not immediately available. And lastly, is contacting the head coach and the university directly, and I encourage that. And that should be done by the student, not by the parents, not by the counselor. And you could write an email to the coach. It's all going to be on the website. And you start that at grade 9 or grade 10. And they would write a letter and then also include a one-page sports resume to indicate their achievements, their accolades, tournaments that they've competed at. They can submit a link to their video, no more than 5 minutes, because coaches can quickly identify their athletic ability. It's probably easier in teams or in sports with times, track or swimming, and you can see, where that time is comparative to other athletes currently on the roster. For team sports, yes, it's going to be a little harder, but if you can have any footage on video, that would be very helpful. And also, they should also contact the coach to maybe inquire about participating in their summer sports programs. And when I used to work at UCLA in the athletic department, and I ran the summer camps. And so that students should come to these camps to gain the exposure so that they develop the relationship. They also get instruction from the coach, and also the other coaching staff can come from other universities and colleges too. So it's a really good opportunity to get feedback.
Yeah, Julie, what would be the appropriate time to come for these summer camps, junior years? When do you recommend that we tell our kids to come there?
Yeah, between grade 9 and 10, and after the summer of grade 9 and grade 10, yeah. Maybe just 2 or 3, but really carefully do a lot of research and go to these camps at the university and that they're interested in attending. Yeah, so I mean other organizations, or sports companies like Nike or IMG also host camps, and they may use words like elite or showcase, and those would be fine too, but it's better to go to the camp held at the university. And Seth will go on to talk about the NCAA Eligibility Center.
So this website is where all of your student athletes or potential student athletes will start their journey. They should start this as early as possible. Probably 9th grade is the time to start doing this. There's a bit of a fee. I think we talk about that in a second. There's a bit of a fee to sign up in the Eligibility Center. If you talk with anybody who used to be a student athlete a long time ago, they'll call this the clearinghouse. The name, the clearinghouse, is dead. No one uses it. Everybody uses the Eligibility Center now. So Eligibility Center is where they sign up and they put in a bit of information. I think we have we'll give this all to you so that you'll have it later, so we won't go through all of this, but it shows kind of what they're looking for in the Eligibility Center, as well as the application fee. It's a little bit more expensive for international students. It's a little bit more expensive for international students because the NCAA will do an equivalency of their education. So the NCAA, they're actually the pioneers in international student credential evaluation. They were the first ones to do it. They're the ones who wrote the book on reviewing international credentials. So they use that fund because they have a whole group of people that review credentials to make sure that they're eligible.
So there was this, on the next slide you said SAT, slide after that, ACT, SAT required items, but you said start in grade 9.
Yeah.
My kids are doing this
Yeah,
in
yeah.
grade 11.
So it's starting in grade 9 of getting a profile in place and letting them know what type of competition they're doing for eligibility reasons, and then as they go along they'll be able to submit more and more documentation.
Is this a one-time fee or an annual?
One-time fee. Yeah, so once they sign up they'll be able to use that same eligibility number.
What you're saying is effectively build a portfolio
Yes.
online.
100%. And the reason for that mainly is this idea of amateurism. So we won't go into this too much, but amateurism is the big word that the NCAA is looking for. If they consider your student a professional athlete, they're usually not always, but ineligible to play at some different level. There'll either be a partial qualifier or a full qualifier. You can see all the terminology online. But basically it means if the student has been paid to play, they're in danger of not being an amateur any longer. They're a professional athlete, which sometimes will make them ineligible. The most common or the best example of this internationally is an NBA player, Enes Kanter. He was from Turkey and he was planning to go to a university in the United States to play at the NCAA level, Division I, and he couldn't do that, so he had to go to the NBA right out of high school. But for him, he was ineligible to play because he had been paid to play in Turkey. So that's something you have to be careful of, and our office's compliance officers can help you determine whether or not the activities that your students are engaged in would be considered professional. They can be reimbursed for costs, like if it took them money to get to a tournament, they can get that money reimbursed. It's just when it goes above and beyond that it's a stipend or it becomes a salary, and that's where professionalism comes into play. Yeah.
So actually, like one of the students recently applied for a golf program, and the coach had responded that they are looking for a scratch handicap. Now when you say that looking for a scratch handicap is as though they are reaching a level of professionalism in golf. Now when a coach replies like that, then you say that no, they are not looking for somebody who is an expert. So he has been playing tournament. He was already a 5-over, and prior to that he was a 7-over. Now he's a 5-over currently, and he played one tournament. He went to US, he played the tournament over there. So now the question is, now in this case, like till what extent we are expecting the student to be professional? Like is there any definition here?
So professional versus amateurism is not ability and inability. It's if they get paid or not to get paid. So we want a student who is as good at golf as possible, but has never gotten paid to play golf. And that's the difference between, it's not skill level, it's professionally you're getting paid to play golf. So the better the golf player.
But reimbursements is okay. So
Reimbursements is
perhaps
okay.
watch kid whose flights, etc. is covered.
Yep.
The parent is covered
Yep.
because he's a minor.
So keep all those receipts. Make sure they keep their receipts, because a lot of times compliance officers will ask for that. But you'll want to talk to the individual compliance office at whatever university is scouting that student to ask about what they would deem as putting them over the edge. And there's a lot of other options too. I won't go into it too much, but there's a lot of other options of even if something has happened where they've gotten paid or something has iffy when it comes to compliance, there's other options that it's not a black or white situation. They can go and appeal to the NCAA, and the NCAA could say, well, they have to sit out for a year, or they're ineligible for 1 year. They can practice, but they can't compete. Or they can, so there's a lot of gray area within the eligibility. They would be. And then there's also another level where if they determine that they're not compliant and they're not an eligible player, they cannot even practice. Yeah, so it's all up to the coach or the compliance office and the NCAA to determine what they're able to do. But using the eligibility center is the best place to find that language, to find what determines that. It's different for every sport. So each sport will have a whole brochure specifically on their requirements. So use this eligibility center quite heavily. That's going to be your Bible for all of this and whatever sport your student is looking to play. We'll give you this. This is a timeline, just an average timeline that you should be going through when in grade 9, 10, 11, and 12. So you'll have this in the PowerPoint. And also a lot of this is also on the NCAA's website based on the sport. So use that eligibility center quite heavily, specifically for the sports your students are looking to play.
Thanks.
Recap.
Okay, thanks. Okay, good. All right. So to help prepare for this talk today, we actually surveyed Mumbai area counselors, and it's interesting because about 60%, which was in keeping with this class or this room here, had worked with professional with student athletes in the past. So, and although 8 out of 10, you look at the gender breakdown, were female. And we found a little bit more diversity in terms of both their destination and the sport when it came to the male student athletes than the women. And so that was kind of interesting. You can see some of the statistics there. You can put the next one, okay?
We also kind of talked with them about some of the habits of their students and got feedback from counselors on the characteristics of these exceptional students and what they were doing to secure positions in university. And while they all demonstrated incredible self-motivation, they had highly developed executive functioning skills in terms of their time management, their decision-making ability, and of course their talent. It just speaks volumes in terms of the pressures that are on these students to be able to make it to this point. Makes me tired just looking at the list. You can go ahead. Okay. And then we also asked them for some feedback in terms of some of their concerns and the different things that they wanted guidance with. And I think depending upon the role that you play or the roles that you play as counselors in your independent organizations, many of you might be teaching classes, you may have incredibly large student bodies that you are serving. Your time and energy that you're able to devote to the student athlete will vary. But these were just some of the things that, of course, counselors are concerned about, and just needing to band together, just use resources that we have available and help support the students as they're going through this process. The counselor's role also varies, I think, in a really difficult background, of course, and of course you do your best to really help them get a leg in the world. But just keeping perspective that, again, as Julie and Seth said, this is their process, this is their journey, and we're there to help guide them and help them think through kind of the decision-making process. Okay. So to that point, like, how do you juggle all of this? There's an incredible amount of pressure on our students already. I'm not sure how many in this room are IB students or just CSA. And of course, all of our students are just under incredible pressure with their end-of-year exams, managing all of their their community activity in addition to their sports and their academics. So just some things to keep in mind. Getting ahead of their tasks, sleep. At school, this is something I harp on regularly with my students. All too often I'm hearing students coming back, they've slept only at 2 o'clock in the morning, they're coming back at school, and not surprising, they're not as alert in the classroom, right? So just helping students kind of reflect on how they work at their best and how they're managing these responsibilities now in high school. And how will they then manage it when things step up and the pressure is even higher in university? Oh, yeah, I have it now. We made that transition. So my background is actually in social emotional counseling before I started university counseling. And I'm working with a student this year who is a football player. And when I sit down and talk with him, he is now in grade 10. He is very, very clearly all about playing. We sit at the table with his parents, and of course, the academics come into the discussion. And one of the things that I want to do, and I plan to do this year when I sit down with him for the first time, is have him do an identity map. I'd like to know from his perspective, and I think sometimes when we talk about it, we don't really get to the heart of the matter. And this is just a tool that people might consider using. You can help guide the process as a counselor to kind of think of some of the categories, or you can just have a blank piece of paper there and let them go crazy and see what they put in the center. My student might put football player in the center. Right? And it just kind of helps us then have a discussion tool and helps them kind of reflect on their priorities and their goals. There's also some really cool things online, and I have a lot of different tools that I've used in some of my guidance lessons before in measuring student grit. I'm sure you guys have heard a lot about that discussion of grit or mindset. These types of things can help students kind of reflect on, do they persevere? And of course we can influence this. We can help build these skills in our students, but they have to be willing and ready to jump into that. So just thinking about some of these things to help broaden the discussion a little bit. Because, again, it is extremely challenging. And here you've got a wonderful book here, that The Miseducation of the Student Athlete, How to Fix College Sports. So just really, the important thing is to remember that they're a student first, student athlete. And this is, there's so many resources online, and Seth had referred to this in the past, or earlier in the presentation, but here's just an excerpt from one of the NCAA printed materials. But you can see, depending upon if a student is in a competition period or not, the number of hours that they're devoting to their sport during the day, and then how that breaks out, over the course of the week. So it's really important for students to kind of reflect on how they're using their time currently and how that might change depending upon the division and how frequently they're playing, they're touring, these types of things.
One of the things I've had parents report back to me is that which they didn't realise until their child went, was that they they've got no time other than the academic and sports. So
Yeah.
the parents typically are sending around sort of $5,000 a year for sort of incidental expenses that the student might otherwise incur money for, campus work or whatever.
Yeah, no, definitely.
So
I mean,
that could be a surprise to some.
yeah, and so just helping them, again, we're really, I think our greatest strength is to really just helping them be rational decision makers, right? And to be reflective. I mean, it's great to have goals and dreams, and we don't want to squash these dreams, but we also want them to be healthy and be happy.
Also, could
Yeah.
I add on something?
Yeah.
Also, if it's a sport which carries on for say 6 to 8 hours, children after playing the sport they're very, very tired.
Definitely.
So they
Takes everything out of them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they sleep often. They can't study for the next 1 or 2 days.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and so helping, and this is what we do as counselors just in general, right? We're helping students think of factors of fit when they're identifying a university in general, whether they're an athlete or not. And so helping them understand, do you want to be a little fish in a big pond, or are you okay with an extremely competitive environment, academic environment, and do you need small classroom sizes? The same applies to the student athlete. Just yesterday, I had an alum come into our office at OIS, and he's at York University in the UK, and while he had offers to study in the United States, he chose to go to the UK because he was going to get more playing time. And his priority, and granted it's an amazing university, York University, but I think he started off with that idea of going to the NCAA, but he realized that if you look back maybe at his identity map, playing the sport and building his career as a professional athlete was his priority, and thus he chose to go to the UK. Yeah.
But though NCAA doesn't, Division 1 doesn't have a lot of top institutions barring few names, but in general, when a student is taking a heavy curriculum like a computer science, do you really recommend a heavy curriculum actually to be taken up with a sport in the university, or recommended that they should take up a light curriculum?
Yeah, I would throw that back to the audience and see kind of what their thoughts are. But we were just talking with U of Toronto the other day, and it's hard for students to even stay for after the second year at U Toronto if they're in computer science. So some of the counselors that were responded to the survey also talked about the students that they have supported through this process were in the upper kind of 10% of their student class. They were high performing academically. We didn't ask about their major or what they were studying. Have any of you had students that have studied computer science? And yeah?
Not particularly computer science, but they've done pretty rigorous programs, and I've found that universities, they report back to me that the universities are very supportive of their academic, and particularly in big sport like basketball, the university will arrange for extra tuition and assistance.
Yeah, and that gets back to that coaching them for the right fit. What type of environment, academic and sports, are they going to excel in and be happier and healthier? Okay. All right. So we don't need to talk about this. We know the reality, but just helping ground them a little bit. And then remembering that there's much more involved with just playing the sport, right? I mean, there are lifelong skills that a student is gaining through this experience, and helping parents keep that mindset. So often, much of our time is spent on kind of moving parents and students away from rankings. I think it's very similar in this respect, right? We're kind of like helping them see the bigger picture. Okay. So I won't go into details here, but in terms of just identifying opportunities, in terms of sports programs and universities, looking at the different divisions, talking with their high school coach. Do I have what it takes? Looking at some of the online videos and the information about the sports, the athletes that are currently at the universities that you're intrigued with the idea of studying at. These types of things will help the students kind of create a long list, I guess I like to call it. And then at OIS, we ask students to choose 10 universities. If they're applying to the UK, we consider that one application because you just submit it and it's done, right, if you're going through UCAS. But we try to get them to cut it down to 10 universities. Now, if you're looking at becoming a student athlete, you might have a much, much broader list. You may be contacting, you may even have to send 100 email messages. My friend that I was talking about earlier from Brazil, her students, it was amazing the number of contacts that they tried to make. They were very, very open-minded. But then you start digging a little bit deeper, right? And you're looking at those questions of fit, you're looking at the entry requirements a little bit more, the standardized tests. And you're identifying in the scouting camps and sports camps, how can you best connect with these coaches and these individuals? One back. How do I go back? Yeah, here. I loved this idea, and I hadn't even thought about this, but when I was talking with my counselor friends, connecting with other players via Facebook. I avoid Facebook because it's like such a time suck, but a lot of my friends' students had actually just put a feeler out there on Facebook to some athletes, student athletes that were at the school that they wanted to hopefully attend, and they got messages back from them, you know? So, I mean, once you start that communication process, but be creative. There's a lot of really clever ways through our alumni ourselves or through other schools, our own networks as counselors, right, you know? Just be creative in terms of how you access and help them get information. Okay, we all know kind of, I think, about the university application process, but just being aware that you're looking. Again, they have to be accepted by the university to be able to play there. And being mindful, a lot of counselors feel that you need to look at that ED or EA, those early binding agreements that are November 1st, because of course the letter of intent is going to come if they are going to play with the organization, and Seth or Julie can speak more to that. And then lastly, just really again helping them be the rational decision maker and helping them kind of step back and think about the risks, be wary of promises that are made, and remember that the coach might not be there by the time they get there. We're talking about starting this process in grade 9 or 10, right? So how do we prepare them for these ups and downs throughout this entire process? Okay, I'll turn it back over.
Just on the coach, I have a share. We were looking for a squash student, this was a couple of years ago. And a coach at a very...
Yeah.
Resources.
Yeah, to research. Yeah, we'll go back there, sure. Yeah, go
A
ahead.
coach at a leading Ivy university was very keen on the student and said, you know, you're in, the parents were fairly confident. The counselor at that point said, listen, I don't want you signing anything or not applying to other places because this may change. And that is exactly what happened. And by then he had not very nicely rebuffed a couple of other coaches who were interested in him because this was nationally seen.
Sure.
And the student was nationally seen. And it turned out to be a pretty rough year for a child who was doing brilliantly at his sport, initially had 7 interests, and it ended up with nothing.
That's really
So,
unfortunate,
so that your point about coaches changing, yes, they have a lot of say, but the child still has to go through the process,
Yeah.
and it is always best to be a little prudent before you start letting everybody off and saying,
Definitely.
you burn all bridges, and that was not nice, obviously.
And you get excited, right? I mean, and it's very natural, and it's really hard, and we have...
So I have
Go
a
ahead.
question. Is it possible to kind of work with three coaches at the same time and get 3-4 offers? Is that possible?
Maybe Julie or Seth.
You would have to look at the offers. I mean, if scholarship is really important, the scholarship will probably vary a lot. I mean, they may offer you that 10% scholarship or book scholarship. So, but you can, until the national letter of intent is signed, you can.
So you can follow like 3-4
Can I?
Oh, yeah.
Yes, yes.
offers.
You can have multiple offers.
Can you do that?
My only thing with that is you have 2 responsibilities. One is to the school and 2 is to the student.
Yeah.
And if you burn bridges with certain coaches, then if you have batch after batch coming, you have to be a little conscious about that. It's the same ED question I get.
Yeah.
You know, what if I'm applying to Cambridge and I'm doing ED somewhere? There is an ethic involved, and as a school, you still have to have that priority to the school. Does that make sense to you?
I don't think it's unethical to negotiate with a few until you've accepted an offer. Once you've accepted an offer, then you're bound to tell the other coaches that you've accepted from them. So until you've accepted an offer, you can be dealing with as many as you like.
I think for Division I for NCAA, if you do an ED, that binds you. Yeah, because and most student athletes are not going the path of ED. So yeah, because they want to maximize all the opportunities through the athletic scholarship opportunities.
And I feel like if you have a student that's at the highest caliber, I think the problem is going to be the other way around. You'll have to fend off universities from recruiting your student. If they're the best swimmer, your mailbox will be filled because they're going to see the results online and they'll be like, you have the best swimmer in India, and now you're going to get hundreds of letters from all of these universities asking for the swimmer. So it'll almost be, if you have a very high caliber athlete, it might be the exact opposite, where you're not trying to only find one, they're flooding you with information.
My question is, can you keep 5-6 options
course.
open?
Yeah.
Until that student signs the national letter of intent, they can have whatever option. That's kind of the point of the national letter of intent. And all of the rules, something that we did not go into, which, because it's so convoluted, is there's quite a bit of regulation per sport based on what the coach can do for recruitment of the student. So this is all to protect the student from being hard sold university. So it's to protect the student from not feeling like there's a recruiter on their door every single day knocking and saying you have to be at my university. So it's to give the student choice. So the NCAA is attempting to do just what you're asking, is to let the student weigh their options, let the student see what the best option for them is and choose the right one when the time is coming. So before they sign their name, they can do what they want. They should feel like they're in control.
To add to this resource list, also, I mentioned a little bit earlier some counselors that I was talking with in Brazil and stuff, and they used to work with Education USA, and we didn't put that up here on the list, but they have great programs that advise student athletes, and so I would encourage you to check it out. And also, we were at, I think all of us, yeah, at International IACAC, and we went to a conference, or like a session that talked a little bit more in depth about, is it books? How do you pronounce the UK? Is it BUC? Yeah, BUCS. And then also the program in Canada. So they had representatives that were involved in the presentation. So it was not just the US student athlete perspective, but the other countries as well. And I have a copy of that presentation I'd be happy to pass to you, as well as any other resources and stuff that we've acquired, kind of to put this presentation stuff together. So just let us know and we'd be happy to pass this information on to you. Yeah. Other questions? Yeah.
I'm a little new to all this sport when it comes to sports. I just want to know, when we are talking about the sports profile, is there a particular structure or a template that you're looking for? How do they put up things that they've done?
With the sports resume, you guys can probably speak to this a lot better than me, but my understanding is like we can help guide them because we work with our students to develop a resume in general, right? Because you can upload it now in Common Hub and stuff in the United States, but a sports resume is going to look very different. It could be their stature, their height, which leagues they've played with, their teams, how often they've played, what level of competition, what positions, all of these different types of things, right? And then of course on top of that, you're going to have videos. It might be you want some skill-based videos, kind of short sequences, but also the full gameplay. The statistics that they've had for the individual sports. I mean, maybe you can add to that.
In our school, there's a questionnaire that the student is required to fill out. So they would come to my university, they would click on men's diving and swimming, and then there would be a form that they would need to fill out. This is my name, this is my score, I'm doing IB or I'm doing IGCSE, and they would ask, what's your 100 freestyle or 50 free, and they would ask for your times. So they create, at least for Indiana University, they create a template so that student doesn't have to guess what they want. Same thing with golf, they'll say what tournaments they play.
Is there any general online template for, like you have for Indiana?
So what I did in that situation was I had them look at schools like Indiana that had it online. I think UCLA had a really good one online. And then if they really wanted to make it like in a Word document, I said, now you know it's essentially what they're looking for. Put that same information in a Word document, and then of course then you can cater it in case there isn't an online resource. So we kind of made up a template based on looking at what a few online, and it's generally the same thing.
You can't do it wrong. I mean, it's basically, your name, your height or weight,
So
what
just
tournaments,
look at
because if you're playing in tournaments.
with what
I
they
think
want.
it's really important to
Just look at
include
a few.
key academic information because often the
No, it's a
coach.
sports resume, it's not an academic
No,
resume.
I disagree with you on that because I'll tell you why. I put the key academic information on just a few lines of what they're doing because if the coach knows that their athlete is also academic, they're going to be talking to the liaison team and saying, can you flip me some more money because I haven't got enough to give this guy a full ride.
And that's definitely a thing at sports that are not head count sports.
Yeah,
That the NCAA does not require a full scholarship for each athlete. What they'll do is they'll wheel and deal. They'll try to find out, oh, is this student, when we used to have automatic scholarships, oh, the athletics department loved that because they knew exactly how much their high achieving, high academically qualified athletes were going to get. So then they would always be able to say, I know you're going to get $7,000 in a merit scholarship from the university, so I'm going to decrease my sports scholarship by $7,000. So in that way, promoting your academic profile, if it's not a head count sport, could be beneficial for the interest that the coach might have.
You don't need to go in the full sort of transcript, but it's key. You know, like
IB scores,
IB scores.
IGCSEs.
But a lot of coaches don't know what IB scores are. I mean, they're going to look at your sports resume, and they're going to see what tournaments and competitions, and they've heard of those events, that you've been at the national, national championship. If you're at the all-state, at a smaller state, like, they're not going to really care. It's a one-pager. There's no wrong to it. It's just what awards you've been all-state, all-West region, whatever it is. They're going to look at those titles, those accomplishments.
Actually, so as per the CBSE format, let's say if the student actually stops playing a sport for a while, let's say around April, May, June, they are actually becoming a little heavy on the curriculum side, because their exams are drawing near and they have to maintain some SATs and maybe giving the SAT subject test at the same time for some colleges. And if the tournaments are not played in the last 4 or 5 months, but practically have been consistently playing, does that really damage anything for the student, or is that okay to look at? Like, are they looking at the latest tournament I played like 1 month or 2 months before?
Oh, no, I think it would be across their high school years.
So right from 9th onwards, right?
Like 9th grade and onward, yes. And then they'll want to see maybe what you're planning to participate in the coming months as well, because maybe that coach might be traveling to that, world
Coming from the
championship.
Indian student perspective, because currently like if the student is like having his exams, and after that he can attend tournaments in India, he can report those tournaments to the coach, but it will be just like on paper whatever he can say.
And I can't stress enough how little, this may be a bad thing, how little influence I have in that decision. so for what you're asking about is how is it important that it's most recent? Maybe yes for our golf coach, but maybe no for our swimming coach, or the other way around. So it's since the coach is the one who has 100%, besides for the admissibility, has 100% of the power in this situation. It is so dependent on what they're looking for. They can be very neurotic, very particular about what they want. So it's what the best thing to do is to get a sense for what that coach is looking for, because it's difficult for us to be able to influence that. And the other way around is even more unethical for the coach to influence anything that we do.
But they do support the attitude. So they say that, okay, this is the good guy, he's getting the right SATs, he's on the academic track.
You're saying, does the coach come to us and?
Yeah, can a coach put a word to the academics?
It depends on the school. Our coaches will never. I've never spoken to a coach, and that's to insulate NCAA compliance. So I don't ever speak with a coach. I only speak with an intermediary, the compliance officer, because if it's found out that the coach is influencing the admission decision, then we have a real big problem. So that student will probably no longer be able to play in athletics.
You guys were talking about SAT and ACT too, and I just thought it was interesting because as I was looking at more of the statistics on the entry requirements for the certain divisions, I saw kind of I saw an inverse relationship between kind of the standardized test score and the grade performance. So that if a student, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if a student is much higher performing in the classroom setting, or their IB scores or whatever it might be, then what is required from a standardized test score might be a little bit lower, whereas a standardized test score that's really strong might compensate for kind of average grades. From what I
This
understand.
is a new thing in the NCAA, maybe two years ago. It's a sliding scale.
Yeah.
So 2 years ago, it used to be it was just very, very black and white. And then they implemented a few years ago a sliding scale to exactly what you're saying, to allow for a little bit more flexibility with students in their academic, whether they're good test takers or whether they're really great in the classroom, bad poor test takers. So they implemented that a few years ago to get a little more flexible.
And at our school at Oberoi, we really spend a lot of our time trying to educate people about standardized test scores and try to demystify a lot of this. We have way too many students who are spending exorbitant amounts of money on consultants to tell them if they should take the SAT or the ACT, which is ludicrous. Just take a practice test online, figure it out, you know. Khan Academy is free. It's painful for me when I hear students are traveling hour or more to go to a SAT review course when they've got such pressures on them for their coursework. The most important thing, and I think as counselors that's what we need to emphasize to our parents and tell them to chill out, that the most important thing is their performance in the classroom. And just to keep that perspective, because again, kind of like with any academic acceptance for a university, you're either the right fit, you either have what they're looking for in the sports or not. The standardized test score is not going to make it. Is not going to make a no decision a yes. And to help them kind of put that perspective. At our school, we started offering the PSAT and the pre-ACT, and I'm not sure if you're a test center or in your area if that might be available, but that's a great way for students to get a practice, because really it's about practicing how to take a timed assessment, right? So encourage your students to do that when it's not a pressure situation. And remember, it's a stupid test.
It's a good tidbit to end on.
Yeah. Okay.
We're in between you and caffeine, I think. So.
Yeah. So it's 2 o'clock. I think we're done. Please let us know if you have any other questions. We'd be happy to share materials.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.